I want to then, almost in hindsight, and ask this with a heavy heart, actually. Is October the 7th, of course, the occupation did not start then. You know, the threats did not start then. The history does not start on October the 7th. But is what has been the genocide in Gaza, is that fulfilling what is a scripture that's been predestined beyond our understanding?
Our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, prophesied that in the end time there will be great liars and therefore great deception. So beware. People who can't see beyond their nose cannot recognize deception and would be deceived. And unfortunately, that's the majority of us today. Israel is advancing with her agenda successfully, while we are asleep, looking, not being able to look beyond our noses, okay? I admire those who resist Israel, the Islamic resistance, they call themselves Hamas. I admire the Mujahideen in Afghanistan who fought the Americans for 20 years until Uncle Sam had to put his tail between his leg and exit Afghanistan in defeat. I admire these people. They know how to fight, but unfortunately they don't know how to think properly. So what happened in Gaza is that Israel, which has a PhD in deception, wanted in 9/11 to justify what Israel is now doing before the world. Okay? They did it once before with something called the Holocaust. And the Holocaust made it possible for them to proceed to advance their mission in the world. They did it with 9/11, and now they've done it with October 7. What happened in October 7 has to be understood through connecting the dots, because whoever has the evidence will be killed. That's right. So don't ask me where is the evidence. When you don't know how to connect the dots, go back to school. So all the weapons and all the massive amount of sophisticated art of the state weapons and drones and so on, which were being shipped to Ukraine, provided an opportunity. And what the CIA and the Israeli Mossad did was to siphon off some of those weapons and drones and use their client state of Saudi Arabia to be able to funnel the weapons and the drones into Gaza. And Hamas, which unfortunately did not have much capacity to penetrate the deception, they believed that these weapons were coming from Allah. They believed that these weapons were coming from Allah because the Saudis are our friends, our brothers. Whereas the government of Israel, not all the members of the government, the Prime Minister in particular, he knew what was happening. And then the Israeli government was warned that the attack was coming. Egypt warned them. Members of the Israeli armed forces warned them. They ignored the warnings because they wanted the attack to take place. The Israeli government is complicit in the deaths of more than 1,000 Israeli citizens when the attack took place, and so many hostages were taken. Israeli government could have prevented it if they wanted to. They didn't want to prevent it. When the attack took place, then Israel got the opportunity to launch the attacks that they wanted to launch, long planned, but could not launch because of public opinion around the world. What I did not know was that a part of the plan was also Syria. And when Trump was elected as president, because they did not trust Trump, and because Trump was on record And he cannot avoid now. He's on record that he wants the war in Ukraine to end. And he said, I can do it on day one in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So the whole world is now expecting when the United States gets Trump as president, that the war in Ukraine is over, by the shouting. So they had a little time left. A window of opportunity was all they had left to do something to change the discourse. And they were hoping that if they gave their puppy dogs the weapons and the green light to attack Syria, this is the so-called mujahideen. I don't call them mujahideen, I call them Israel's puppy dogs. If we give them the go-ahead to attack during the period after Trump won the election and before his inauguration, we have a chance to save Ukraine. That is that we must attack Syria in such a way as to provoke Russia and Iran to enter the war to save Assad. That was the master plan. And if Russia and Iran were to enter the war to save Assad, NATO would enter the war. And that would mean that Ukraine will have a second lease of life. That was the master plan. But Allah blessed Russia with insight. And when Russia realized that this was the master plan, Russia then advised Iran, and both Russia and Iran informed Assad and the Syrian armed forces, we are not going to intervene. And they realized, therefore, there's no sense fighting anymore.
Syria, of course, happened, 2011. By 2013, Hezbollah then enters Syria, and we have successive years of war being fought there. A little bit spills over into Iraq and so on. And we see coming onto the scene are these groupings that are then funded by the Americans, supported by the Israelis, as well as the Turks are playing a significant role there. Turkey, of course, a member of NATO, but also has its own nationalistic interests with the Kurds and so on. You've always maintained that these guys are not freedom fighters. They of course make takfir and they declare people apostates and so on, and they do the most vile things at the time since 2011. More than a decade later, we see things fall in the way that they did and how quickly Syria fell. And there seems to be, again, a point of contention about who the current people in power happens to be in Syria at the moment, Julani and so on. Julani, of course, coming from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and before then it was Jabhat al-Nusra, and before then it was ISIS, as it were. He says they reformed. They're calling to be removed from a terror list that of course is being hosted by the United States, and now appear to be setting up this new Syrian modern state that's going to be free of any sort of extremist ideology, as it were. Let's deal with the Syria situation and who's in control at the moment, because being in opposition to that seems to suggest that you're fine with an Assad government who has had, together with his father, had a very negative, let's call it reputation, in the massacres and things that have happened, the Baath massacre and so on. So what is your sense about the complexity that Syria represents and who's in charge at the moment?
I would be a fool to defend an oppressor. I've always condemned oppression. And if Assad was an oppressor, he must be condemned as an oppressor. Okay? I was not aware of what is now being peddled in the public about the prisons in Syria. But let me tell my critics that every single government around the world today have that kind of baggage. They're committing oppression around the world, in their prisons and so on. All over the world, probably Syria, Saudi Arabia, most of all. But they bark and they bark and they bark about Assad, and they want to accuse me now of being silent when they are silent about all the rest. So what's new? I am not defending an oppressor, not at all. But if Assad was resisting Israel, and they say no, Assad was not resisting Israel because they have nothing in their head but peanuts. If Assad was resisting Israel, then that was the right thing to do. Who have taken over from Assad? Are they resisting Israel, or did they take Israel's weapons and drones and so on to fight the war? When they were being injured in battle, did they not go to Israel and they were being treated in Israeli hospitals? Did Netanyahu not come to visit them? These Israeli puppy dogs who now control Syria were in hospitals in Israel, and Netanyahu went to visit them in the hospitals. So tell me, was it better to be under Assad resisting Israel, or to be now under the control of Israel's puppy dogs, and Syria is no longer in resistance of Israel? Syria is like Saudi Arabia, in a state of servile submission. So don't come at me with all of this nonsense, diverting the subject about Assad's oppression, because I condemn all oppression. Let's do that and stop that discussion and come here, which is a major discussion. And when we come here, we find that now all that remains after Syria is that Iran is resisting Israel, and Yemen is resisting Israel, and all the rest are in servile submission. This is my analysis from the Quran. The Quran is teaching me, I don't know who is teaching them. The Quran is teaching me that when the Jews and the Christians join together in friendship and alliance, and that is what has happened today in the Zionist movement, and that is what is NATO. And you join NATO and you become a member state of NATO, the Quran says you're no longer a part of this ummah. Tell that to Erdogan, who is not only a member of NATO, but comfortably so, and exploiting Turkish membership in NATO to advance his own agenda. And he pretends to be a leader for the Muslims. Only sheep and cattle would accept Turkish credentials. I reject them.